Hey everyone, I've been wanting to remake this video for a long time. I like to call this like a rabid fruit exercise, but basically it shows you how to take any kind of fruit or vegetable and then superimpose and composite a mouth onto it, like an animal mouth. There's lots of different options you could choose from. Today I'm just going to show you with an apple and then also a lion's mouth. Right now I'm in Photoshop. I just opened up this picture of an apple, which is a fairly large image. I am going to go to image size here and just show you the size. So it's basically, if I change it into inches, we've got 12 by 10 inches. So that's a pretty sizable apple. What I am going to do though is you'll notice that there's lots of white space around this apple. However, I feel like I would like even more white space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my canvas size and I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. So I'm going to just click on this relative box, and that means that I'm going to put in here that I want 3 inches more on either side and also 3 inches. Actually, I might make this. So because I'm going to have my mouth go to the right, I'm actually going to click on this, and I believe that that's going to give me all those 3 inches on just the one side. So I'm going to hit OK, and it gave me it on the wrong side. So I'm actually just going to undo that and redo it. So adjustments, I'm sorry. Canvas size, and I'm going to go to that side. And I'm going to say 3 and 3. So the height, it's going to balance it between the top and the bottom, and the width, it's just going to put it on that right-hand side. And I hit OK. And this is just going to leave me room for that mouth, just kind of visually speaking, and give me the kind of composition that I'm looking for. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we want to make a duplicate of this background image. And I'm going to make sure that while I'm working through this, that I'm making all these changes kind of non-destructively, which means that I'm not altering pixels permanently. I'm just making changes that can be then undone. I also want to kind of like prevent myself from having any mistakes. So I'm actually going to make 3 copies. No, sorry, I'm going to make 2 copies of this. So I'm going to end up with 3 layers that are exactly the same. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock that layer, and then I'm going to use the key command, Command J, which there are lots of different ways to make duplications, but this seems just like the easiest way. So I'm going to rename that bottommost one, and I'm going to call it Original Apple. And I'm going to lock it on my layers panel here, clicking on that padlock and hiding it. This is just going to be like, in case I screw up one of these other ones, I have this here and I don't have to worry about kind of like placing it back into the document or anything else. I'm also going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to fill this layer with white. So in order to do that, I'm going to just take my paint bucket here. I'm going to get my default background and foreground by clicking on this little tiny squares, and then I'm going to switch that, and I'm just going to dump that. Now you're not going to actually see that much change in your document. You're just going to see that particular layer turns white. And that's in case like we move any of this background of these upper ones, because we're going to be doing some transforming and stuff like that. That will save us from kind of seeing holes in this background. Okay, so now I'm going to rename these layers as well, and I'm just going to say this is going to be my bottom apple, and I'm going to name this one top apple. Okay, so just so I know which one I'm working with. Okay, so now we want to place our animal mouth in, and you'll understand later why we kind of have these 2 apples. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to choose Place Embedded. Embedded means that this image that I'm placing is going to become part of this file. If I choose to link it, it will exist outside of the file as its own file, and I'd kind of have to move those files everywhere. Linking files is great for when you're kind of trying to have the same file in multiple, like a series of something. It really works well with other programs as well, but for right now we're just going to choose Place Embedded. And I have this lion mouth on here. Okay, so whenever you place an image, the first thing you're going to see is that there's going to be this X on here, and that basically allows you to transform the size. Right now, I don't really want to transform the size, so I can either double click on the document or I can hit this checkbox up here, and that means that it's going to place it. Now you'll notice that when I placed it, before I placed it, it was very pixelized. And so I was able to, once I placed it, that pixelation went away. So quickly, before we do anything else, I actually want my mouth to go the opposite direction. So the first thing I have to do is kind of change the facing of the mouth. And I'm going to do that by going to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. Okay, and that's just going to flip my mouth. Now I'm going to lower my transparency up here a little bit so that I can kind of see it and I can put it where I want it to be. Now I probably want it to be a little bit larger, so I am going to go to Edit and then Transform, and I can either choose Scale, or I can also choose Free Transform, which is Command T, which I like to use because it's kind of quicker than going through all the menu options. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to make sure, so in the newest version of Photoshop, you shouldn't have to hold down your Shift key, but if you notice that as you are making this bigger, you're kind of distorting your image, you want to hold down the Shift key to maintain the proportions. So if you're in the newest version of Photoshop, it will just automatically maintain those proportions for you. And again, once I'm done, I'm either going to double click or I'm going to use that check mark up at the top. Okay, I'm going to turn my opacity back up to 100%, and I'm going to start the process of kind of cutting out this mouth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the lasso tool, which basically allows me to kind of like free draw around the mouth. And I'm just going to do like a very basic drawing, not specific at all, around the mouth. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm on that layer with the mouth, and I'm going to mask it. Okay, so the part that was inside of the selection is the only part that I see, and all the rest is masked. Now I still want to maintain, I want to mask it instead of cutting it, because that means that I can kind of paint in and out this actual image, and I can kind of really seamlessly blend it. Now I want to place my mouth. If I want to move my mouth around, I'm going to just use this move tool, which is like the arrows going in all directions. And I just click on that and I can move it around. And you'll see up here at the top, there is an option to auto select. So if I were to kind of click on my apple, I might accidentally move it, which I don't want to do right now. So I'm going to hit Control Z, and you can also, if you wanted to, like lock these layers just so that you don't accidentally mess them up or move them around. All right, so I want to position the mouth like so that it's a little bit outside of the apple, because it want the apple, we're going to stretch the apple and make it look as though the mouth is actually kind of like opening, and there would be like a stretching that happened with that. I am going to hit Command T, and I'm going to rotate this a little bit by kind of moving my cursor to the outside of the bounding box, and you're going to get a curved arrow, and I'm just going to tilt it a little bit more so that it's kind of like evenly placed with that apple. Now, in order to kind of get this real effect, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you're choosing kind of a side profile of the mouth. If you have something that's face on, you won't get the opportunity to use those warp tools that we're going to use in a little bit. It just won't look right. All right, so the next thing we want to do is kind of blend this side of the mouth in so that it looks like it's part of the apple. So the best way to do that is we're going to select on our mask. Notice that you can select between the thumbnail and the actual mask. You want to have the mask selected, and then we're going to select our brush. And you want to just have like a basic soft round brush, and what you want to do is you're going to kind of like, if you paint with white, what should happen, oh, it would help if I had the brush on the right settings. You want to make sure it's on normal. If you paint with white, what's going to happen is your image is going to show up again. If you paint with black, this is going to hide it, and that means it's going to hide your image. Because we have chosen like a soft brush, as we kind of go along the edge here, you'll notice that it feathers our image. So what it's going to do is it's going to start to make it, the edges a little bit transparent, and it's going to make it look as though that mouth is really a part of the apple. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so I can get kind of close. And the bigger your brush is, the softer that edge is going to be. So I don't want it to be too soft, but I do want to kind of almost see that apple like coming through, looking like maybe it has a little fur around the mouth or whatever. Okay. Now, the part out here, what I'm going to want to do is I want that to be very crisp. Okay. So the best and easiest way to kind of get that is to use the pen tool. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a path with the pen tool. And I'm going to speed this up so that you guys don't have to spend the whole time watching, and I'll be right back. Okay, so once you've made your selection with your pen tool, notice that I kind of went back in this direction because I'm just wanting to select like all of this, and I might add a point here, all of this area that is along here, so that I can get rid of it. I'm just going to want to get rid of all this blue area. And again, I'm going to move these here. And so the pen tool, if you don't know how to use it, you know, is just kind of like this really powerful tool that lets us be very specific about our selections that we make. And so it can be really helpful in a situation like this. All right, so now in order to turn this path into a selection, I have to find my my paths, and I find that through the path panel. If you don't know where that is, you can go find it under window and then paths, and it's going to show the work path that I created. So all I have to do is select that and then click on this little button right down here, and that turns that into a selection. And so once I have that as a selection, I can add it to my mask. Now the way that I want to do that is I want to make sure that I have my mask selected. I want to make sure that the white is in the foreground, and then I can just hit delete. And what that does is, because the white is in the foreground, it's deleting anything that's white in the mask. And then I can hit Command D, which is going to deselect, and you can see that I have that very clean line. Now there is some blue here that I might go back and kind of clean up with my brush a little bit later, or make another selection. Also, there's some areas here that I feel like I need to clean up. And you have to make sure that you are painting with black. Okay, so let's move on to kind of warping the mouth, warping the apple to make it look like it's actually attached to the mouth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my top apple and I'm going to create a mask. This mask, because I don't have anything selected, it's just going to be a white mask. And then I'm also going to go to the bottom one and create a mask on that. So now I have both of those apples and they both have masks attached to them. I'm going to take this top one and I'm going to take my selection tool. Again, I'm going to use my lasso tool, which allows me to free draw, and I'm going to select a big section of the top of the apple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to edit, transform, and I'm going to go to where it says warp. And this allows me to actually like move and warp the apple. Now the problem is you have to be mindful because it can also shift the back end here, and you want to make sure that things are still lined up. So depending on what kind of fruit or vegetable you have, you want to make sure that even though it's warping it, that you can still make sure that this back end looks appropriate. Okay, so I've warped that part and I've kind of lined it up just to the edge of that mouth to make it look like it's part of it. And then when I'm okay with it, I double click or I hit that checkbox up on the control panel again. and that's the top part. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect that area, and I'm going to do the same part for the bottom. I'm selecting that big area. I want to select the area where it's going as well as the area that I want to move, and then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Warp. And I'm going to select that bottom part, and I'm just going to come and match it up with the bottom part of the mouth. And then again, I want to make sure that this back part is lined up properly and I'm not getting any weird kinks back there. And then I'm going to click on this check mark, and I'm going to also hit Command D, and that's going to give me the apple. Now, we've got this part still here, and just to show you kind of why we have both of those apples, if you hide your bottom apple, you'll see that there are these kind of like white creases. And if you look really closely, you might be able to even see some lines in there on the apple. So one way that we're going to fix that is by going to the mask of the top apple, and we're going to hide the bottom apple, and we're going to take our paintbrush again with the soft brush, so you want to make sure your hardness is down to 0, and we're going to paint with black, and you're just going to kind of paint along those lines. And what this is doing is basically softening those edges so that the apple underneath can kind of fill in and make it look like it's like a soft transition between the top layer and the bottom layer. And so when I turn that bottom apple on, it becomes really seamless. Now we have to take care of this kind of chunk of apple over here. So again, we want to make sure that we're on that top apple's mask. I'm going to hide the bottom apple again. And one way that we can do this is we can just kind of like take the selection tool, kind of draw around that area that is like showing to us, and make sure we're on the mask, and then make sure we have our white on front. So you can use X on your keyboard to flop this foreground and the background, and I'm gonna just hit delete. Now we're gonna kind of select the bottom apple, and we're gonna select that mask, and we're gonna do the same thing. So if you have your selection already made still, I can just hit delete again, and I'm gonna get that work. Okay, so now, so far, this is basically, we're almost done. The one thing that you could do to kind of make this look a little bit more realistic is the inside of the mouth. Well, first of all, I think for mine, I could probably clean up these edges a little bit more. But I also can shift the color of the inside of the tongue to make it look a little bit closer to the coloring of the apple. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to select my mouth, and I'm actually going to use an adjustment layer. I'm going to choose the hue saturation adjustment, and I'm going to just I'm going to choose my reds here, and I'm just going to increase the saturation a little bit on that. Now you'll notice that when I do that, it's actually shifting all of my things, so even the apple, which is not really working for me. So at the bottom of the properties panel, you're going to see this little icon right here, which is like a rectangle with an arrow and a little slash through it, and I'm going to click on that, and what that's going to do is it's going to attach to just my lion. So anything that I make changes to here, so now you can see I'm starting to change that red. I'm going to also go to my yellows and kind of just like do that a little bit, increase that. I also could apply an adjustment layer with the I could probably do color balance, and that would actually help a little bit. I could increase the red and maybe the yellow. And again, I want to apply it just to that mouth. And so when I turn these adjustment layers off and on, you can see the difference that it makes. I might even, this is like maybe going to extremes, but I might also include a levels adjustment, and I'm going to attach it again to the mouth, and I'm just going to kind of like make it a little more contrasty, which might make me in turn want to turn off one of these other adjustments that I made, like maybe the hue saturation. I could turn that down a little bit. I have a little bit to clean up here. But for the most part, that's basically it. And that's a way to kind of composite and combine multiple images to kind of create this other character. So I hope you have fun with this. Try maybe, combining different fruits and vegetables and different animals and see what kind of results you come up with. And so I look forward to seeing all of your options.